notes, I just wanted to welcome you all on behalf of the Center for Brazilian Studies, and also want to just kind of thank everybody who helped pull this panel together. Particularly want to thank Vice Dean Miguel Viola, who helped get us started on this event and was critical to organizing it, as well as Vicky Murillo and Dr. Al Fishlow, who both were instrumental in pulling together this panel and making this event happen today. And also want to thank Taylor Boas, Marcelo Hidenti, and Jose Saintman, our invited speakers for this exciting roundtable. As many of you that have been following things, it's been a very, it's been a bit of a roller coaster of an election campaign in Brazil for the last 2 months. Probably one of the most exciting and unpredictable elections we've had in Brazil in a while. So for that, I'm going to pass it over to Vicky, who's going to be the moderator for the event today. The idea is that we're going to have each speaker is going to give a brief kind of 10-minute commentary, and then we will have plenty of time for discussion and Q&A.
Thank you a lot. I think we have a great presentation. I'm going to just introduce the speakers, and I'm going to take a lot of time. And I think we have a great setup for what is going on. The first one to speak is going to be Taylor Boas, who's an assistant professor of political science at Boston University. And Taylor is currently examining why evangelical Christians in Latin America, act politically. How does it change? And I think this is a crucial part of the current election, what's going to happen with the evangelical vote in Brazil. So we're very happy to have him. He's also studied corruption and the role of information in corruption. Again, the kind of game change that's produced by the protest of last year against corruption is an important part of what's going on in today's, in Brazil's current election. So I'm very happy that Taylor will make it here. Next, we will have a sociologist, Marcelo Ridenti, who's the Ruth Cardoso visiting professor at Columbia for this year, and so you now know that he's here and have the opportunity to take advantage of his presence. He is in the Department of Sociology at the Universidad Estadual de Campinas, UNICAMP, and his research works on the cultural war, the culture of the Cold War, and the internationalization of Brazilian artists and intellectuals. Next, we will have an economist, Jose Schrenkman, who's the Edward Ricker Professor of Economics at Columbia University, and who has also been a very distinguished faculty at Princeton University, at Chicago, where he was the chair of the department. He's a member of the National Academy of Science, fellow of the American Academy of Science, and he's really a Brazilian economist who currently focuses on bubbles, financial markets, and the determinants of the size of the financial industry. This kind of surprise election is telling us a lot of what's going to happen with the economy, so I'm very happy you're joining us on this. And we have to finish Albert Fishlow, whom you all know and needs no introduction, but nonetheless, he's the Professor Emeritus at Columbia University. He is to be thanked for the existence of the Center for Brazilian Studies. He's been a former director of the ILAS, also professor at Berkeley. He has served as Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Inter-American Affairs. And he has most recently wrote O Novo Brasil, las conquistas políticas, económicas, sociales en las relaciones internacionales. And he's going to be the last word on this, and then we will open to the public. Thank you very much. Taylor will give you the time, and he has a very interesting presentation that I want to see.
I will try to be as brief as possible, make several points. So, obviously the question that everybody's interested in is, will Marina Silva win this election and upset the PT, although at this point it might not be an upset. I thought to answer the question would be useful, first of all, to sort of recap a couple of previous elections. So here we see the evolution of vote intention in 2006. Recall that this was Lula running for re-election. The context was that you had the Mensalão the previous year. And then during this campaign itself in September, you had the emergence of the dossier scandal, which is when several PT operatives were arrested for carrying a bag of cash. And so you see the race tightening through October, right? I'm not showing the actual vote here, but Lula's declining in the polls, and then as you move into the second round, so this is showing second round vote intention, and the election's right here. There we go. So election's right here in early October, and Lula largely rebounded and now been declined, right? So an easy victory for Lula in 2006, in part because of attacks during the second round on the PSDB's history of privatizations of state-owned firms during the Cardoso years. All right, so 2010, we have Gilma now running to succeed Lula. And you also had sort of a late-breaking corruption scandal during the month of September in this election. This was the Enenice Guerra, the head of the Casa Civil, who succeeded Gilma and was her second command while she was there, an influence trafficking scandal. And so you see people interpret this last-minute dip in her vote intention to that scandal. And she was expected to win outright by many people. And then in the second round, vote intention. So again, we're showing projected, and then here's the election. Now you go to a second round. And it kind of tightens a little bit, but then Gilma largely pulls ahead and wins by a very large margin in 2010. All right, so what do we see again in 2014? So here's the Datafolha polls up to the most recent one that's been released. Well, there's some interesting similarities between these elections. You have a scandal involving skimming money off the top of Petrobras contracts that was revealed in early September, right? So you've got another September surprise corruption scandal here. I think in contrast to the others, it doesn't lend itself to the sort of dramatic images and attacks that can be tied to the candidate in the same way as the Enenice Guerra thing being the second in command under Gilma when she was in Casa Civil, or the PT operatives apprehended with a bag of cash during the 2006 election, that these images of the cash were used in the TV advertising. And so Gilma is starting to widen this gap here. And if we look at second round vote intention, Marina's still on top, but the race does seem to be narrowing here, right? In the second round, in the last two elections, we saw the PT pull ahead, I think largely in part to attacks that they did on the PSDB candidate related to the history of privatizations and some questions about how this was done and whether people inappropriately profited from that. And I think that you're going to see more attacks on Marina than you've already seen. Seen some already so far. You're going to see more in a second round, and this could go the PT's way, even though Marina is currently leading the second round voting intentions. Let me show you a video from the Horario Electoral, the campaign advertising. This is a week ago. This is Marina's.
Marina Silva! Fique ciente, não vou lhe combater com as suas armas, vou lhe combater com a nossa verdade, com o nosso respeito e com as nossas propostas. Nós vamos manter o Bolsa Família. E sabe por quê? Porque eu nasci lá no Seringal Bagaço. Eu sei o que é passar fome. Tudo que minha mãe tinha para 8 filhos era um ovo e um pouco de farinha e sal, com umas palhinhas de cebola picada. Eu me lembro de ter olhado para o meu pai e minha mãe e perguntado: vocês não vão comer? E minha mãe respondeu: nós não estamos com fome. E uma criança acreditou naquilo, mas eu depois entendi que eles há mais de um dia não comiam. Quem viveu essa experiência jamais acabará com o Bolsa Família. Não é um discurso, é uma vida.
So this is getting a lot of attention during the current campaign, this particular ad, and I just wanted to say a couple things about it. First of all, it's by far her best, I think. I've watched all the Horario Electoral so far for the presidential candidates, and this is the only one where she's really showing such strong emotion. It's the only one where she's speaking at a rally rather than sort of in a staid, studio manner the entire time. So it's gotten a lot of attention. She's also defending herself against attacks that have been made by the PT, and there have been others sort of all of them, raising questions to whether or not she's going to continue the PT government's popular policies. And I think that, more of this is likely in the second round. But, this is incredibly effective ad, I think, in sort of conveying the message that she won't end Bolsa Familia. Every, politician in Brazil says this. But when Marina says it that way, it seems, I think, much more believable than the PSDB candidates. On the other hand, this is effectively, setting the agenda and embracing an agenda that the PT owns, right? And so from an issue ownership perspective, I see Marina here doing the same thing that Lula was doing in 1994 when he was running against the health plan, or that he was doing in 1998 when he was criticizing Cardoso's response to the economic crisis. There are certain issues that certain parties or candidates are effectively just trusted more to handle. So fine, maybe Marina wouldn't cut it, but when you go in to vote, who do you really trust more if you care about Bolsa Familia to continue to effectively manage the program? Okay, so let me then just touch upon another issue which is relevant in this election. And if what I've said so far might imply that the PT can pull this off, and I think that there is a decent chance of that, the evangelical question might favor Marina. So Marina Silva is an evangelical Christian. She's a member of the Assemblies of God. And you have about a quarter of the Brazilian electorate are evangelicals. And this has gotten some attention. You see the Epoca covered here. It hasn't been, a major issue on the same level as corruption and Bolsa Familia and so on in this campaign, but I think it may be lurking in the background in a way that could really matter. So you've also got another evangelical candidate, and one who's a pastor. This is Pastor Everaldo. He's also from Assemblies of God, although a different branch of the church than Marina. He was, before Marina emerged, supposed to be the guy who would get all of the pastor endorsements, who would get evangelical votes in the first round, and then the evangelicals who had supported him would negotiate their support in the second round and have influence. Right? This was the plan. Then Marina enters the race with much more, chance to win, having done really well in 2006. So Everaldo is now at 1% in the polls and is largely irrelevant. So you've got people like Silas Malafaia, who's a televangelist, and other pastors have already said now that they're going to support Marina in the second round. So, the question, an important question will be, what happens with endorsements. You have evangelical churches like the Universal Church of the Kingdom of God that have been very close to the PT, supported Dilma in the last election. What will happen with these various churches and pastor endorsements in the second round? I've got a survey that I'm running right now, an online survey, and there's an experiment, a couple experiments embedded in the survey, and I'm showing you here. We've collected about half of the data so far. It's going to run through the election, so we have about 600 respondents at this point. So this is a question where we've got a control condition here that just refers to the candidate Marina Silva, and then different treatment conditions prime. She's got a number of left-wing positions on some of these moral issues that evangelicals are opposed to, right? So on the one hand here, you refer to some stances she's taken about criminalizing homophobia, the environmental stuff. Then we just mentioned in this other condition that she's evangelical, and then finally the fact that she's gotten support from pastors. This is kind of a throwaway question. We're not really interested in this in the outcome. The main outcome we're looking at is the next one where we ask for a grade for each of the leading candidates, right? So if you look at the effect of these different treatment conditions, so among all survey respondents, there's really, it makes no difference whatsoever in terms of how they evaluate Marina. If we look at evangelicals, you see that this pastor endorsement gives her a boost. She's evaluated more positively with respect to the control group. The difference isn't significant yet, but this is relatively low power at this point. We don't have many respondents. It's gonna the number of respondents should double by the end. And then finally, if we look at people who several questions before already said they intended to vote for Marina, right? So now we're seeing among this group the effect on evaluations of Marina. So this shows an interesting thing, which is that priming the fact that she's evangelical actually lowers evaluations of Marina among her base. I mean, this makes sense when we think about the fact that she's also a left-wing figure who has a lot of support among people who have no connection to evangelicalism whatsoever, but are supporting this new politics message or supporting her environmentalism or whatever, right? And so the challenge here is, can we convey to the evangelicals that there are pastor endorsements without sort of conveying to the broader public or reminding them she's evangelical? right? And she's largely been doing that through her campaign. She hasn't talked at all about religion for anything that I've seen. It's partly her style that she doesn't, sort of discuss these personal issues. But I think, keeping an eye on what these various pastors of the different churches do in terms of their second round endorsements is really going to be an important thing, right? And sort of see how this effect shakes out. Just to underscore that, she has evangelical support, but that her voter base is not, a religious one, primarily. We asked a couple questions about mixing religion and politics, and so you can see that Marina voters and Dilma voters look very similar with respect to whether or not it's right for people to talk about politics and elections in church. Right, the vast majority think it's never right, and they're pretty similar with respect to whether people should base their political attitudes on religion. Right, the mean here is going to be somewhat higher for Marina because you've got more point mass in these, the middle of the row position and the always right, but the distribution looks pretty similar, right? So those are the 3 points I wanted to underscore. Number one, that the previous elections and the evolution of the polls and the fact that the PT in the past has profited from this attack strategy, especially in the second round, right? And there's definitely potential to do that with Marina. I think that conveying that the way some of the media have portrayed this, Marina's leading and she's going to win, is wrong, or at least hasty, right? This could clearly work out for the PT. Number two, one way that it could work out for Marina is this evangelical vote, a quarter of Brazil's population following endorsements from their pastors in the second round.
Thank you very much. You need to go, no, you need to use this?
Yeah, just plug it back.
Hello, it's a pleasure to talk to you, and I would like to thank the organizers of ILAS, the Center for Brazilian Studies of Columbia University, particularly Gustavo Azenha. It's very important to me to talk to Taylor, Boas, Albert Fischlow, José Schneikman, and Victoria Murray. Well, I'm going to talk a little bit about those two women, Dilma Rousseff and Marina Silva. The most recent Datafolha poll indicates that the candidates Dilma Rousseff and Marina Silva are virtually tied in the race for the presidency of Brazil. But Dilma would have an advantage in the first round of the elections, 34 to 30. And she's on an upward trajectory, as we can see on the slide by Datafolha. These figures are close to the poll released today by CNT. It's more or less the same thing. I was just leaving home when I found in the internet the most recent poll that's today. It's, the figures are pretty close. But Marina would have a slight advantage in the second round of the elections, according to Datafolha, 46 to 44. And Dilma would win according to CNT today, 42 to 41. In other words, they are technically even in the second round. Though Aécio Neves has improved his figures in the poll, or in the polls, his 17% do not appear sufficient to avoid the second round between Dilma and Marina. Therefore, I will focus my brief comments on the two favored candidates. The first positive aspect to be considered is that both are women. This expresses